So are there any questions? Maybe I could open that up right now.
Phase 1 is going to be done by the new committee.
Yes, basically what we've thought is that we would do an open house type of thing during that stage where we would invite past committee members along with the new committee members, so there's an overlap and so that the information is being shared. So it would be a combination of both committees kind of working together, so there's a transition.
I didn't think the new committee would be able to present the concept to the
No.
old committee without
Yeah.
a little help.
Yeah, no, they would definitely need some help on that.
Anybody else have any comments? Councillor?
An excellent report, and to my own embarrassment I realized that some of the assumptions I have made earlier were incorrect. I always believed that we had to go through a major referendum to get the public on side to make this community center become reality. As it presents itself now, and I had previously a talk with Christine about it, the only component of that community center which requires a referendum is actually the municipal building itself. That's new to me, and I feel embarrassed that I didn't clue in into that. I cannot see that a referendum for the municipality as such, for the municipality's building, would be at risk because it's a clear business case. It's a better investment, better solution than what is. However, where I have certain questions in my mind, if the major portion of that community center, which costs most of the money, depends on donations, which obviously your group or feels quite confident that those donations are forthcoming, then as a prudent and very cautious man, I would say it's great to have the expectation that the donations are coming, but what would be our fallback position if they don't come? And to alleviate that dilemma, I think the breakdown in several phases is very prudent and deserve our respect. The financial exposure of the municipality is not really that great because most of the money, the big money, is only spent if the donations can be secured. Until then, what we really put at risk is not that much. It's actually pittance relative to the total cost. But I would strongly suggest still that we don't go into this major process without having a fallback position. They say, well, what if not? Because I always relied in my own mind that the funding, the major funding, would come from disposition of some of the land. And I see that still as a very solid fallback position. So what am I saying is part of the first phase, and the new committee should put some of their energies towards a fallback position.
I'd like to just give an example of something like that in what happened in Yakila Community Center on the island that just built a 20,000 square foot facility. And they had done a lot of the fundraising up front. It was $9 million and they were short $2 million. And this was not long ago, about 3 years ago. And they went to referendum for the community to actually borrow the $2 million. And I wanted to give council an idea of what that actually means on Bowen Island if we were in that position of having to go for any additional. And so if we were to take, I met with Kristen and we went through it, if we were to take $1 million loan out at 3.55% over 10 years, based on a household price of $650,000, it would amount to a 2% increase. And what that amounts to is $30 per household per year, which is $2.50 a month. And And I think if we can put, you know, if we bring those into those terms of those discussions about what this all means, you know, it could be a potential fallback at some point in time if that's what. Hopefully we don't. But I think that it just gives a little bit of context around what we're talking about.
When we talk about referendums and raising taxes, I'd like us to throw in the mix as consideration of parcel tax versus general tax rate increase.
Does it make any difference?
No, it means everybody pays the same amount. Like
Or pro rata?
no, everybody pays $100 or $50.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's not
So
just
it's
a budget.
for $3 you pay the same amount as.
As the person who's using the facilities, those houses only worth $600,000. How was that?
And I just have one other thing to point out. There was a typo in my recommendation. It should actually say that council authorizes staff to spend up to $16,500 for phase 1 instead of the $15,000 that was on there. I apologize for that. That's my fault.
That's a good way to slip it in.
No. Well, I'm being honest about it. Putting it out there.
So she didn't want us to approve 15 minutes.
So the phase 1 will entail.
Phase 1 primarily entails a lot of community consultation. That's where all the focus is really being put in, is all around community engagement, getting the committee started up, and development of the website. So that's primarily where that.
Christine, I'm just concerned about this. I think the community engagement is there and has been there a long time. So I don't think that that's an issue. The issue really is the business plan, like, and putting together a tight business plan so that we can move on to the next stage. And that to me is more important. It's going to help. It's going to help with granting agencies. It's going to help with moving forward with fundraising. It's going to help the people of Bowen Island understand the cost and how we're putting things together in a business-like fashion. Because I think it needs, the people on the island need to know that, we're entertaining a big capital outlay, and it's got to be properly run. That's the first thing. But it's also got to be, Ucluelet was a great example, and I've gone through that. And it's more than just a place where people meet. It's sort of pushing the economic engine of the island, of the municipality, Ucluelet. And that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more. We know what we want. We want a community center, we want a community hall, we may want a library. So we know what the components are, but there should be an added component, which is a commercial component, which would help the economic activity on the island and would push forward maybe a hotel or whatever else. It would make it economically viable.
Well, I think that's the work that comes out of phase 2 and phase 3 throughout this process, is that what we haven't limited ourselves to is we're not limiting ourselves when we're looking at rezoning the land, and those can happen in conjunction with what's happening with planning around the different areas, and should council decide to dispose of some of the community lands, that can all be part of it. This planning isn't just looking, what we've indicated here is that we've never said, and what the final report from the committee also said, is that we need to look at other options out there as well in terms of what can help make this financially viable. And that's included in this planning process. So it's not something that's going to be at the outset, it's going to happen throughout this year plus of work that we're actually putting in here.
It's just that, I've had some experience, not as much as you guys, but I've had some experience in this, and I know that the big thing for the municipality and the various funding agencies is to see a business plan that's actually workable. It can have some, blue sky kind of things in it, like we'd like to do this and we'd like to do that.
Mhm.
But basically, it's a business plan. How are you going to run the building? And how are you going to run it so that it's very little cost to the population? And that's all. I'm suggesting that drawing a business plan which you can present to the people of Bowen Island and say, look, here it is. It's fairly tight one way or the other. And some of it may work and some of it may not work. But at least you'll have the input from the various areas. You'll have input from finance committees. You'll have input from the arts and culture community. You'll have that input. And the way that our Chamber of Commerce is going now, you'll have input from the Chamber of Commerce with respect to economic development here on the island. And I think that's really important. I mean, that's the area that we've got to push in. We've just talked about the financial plans for the island for this year and for the future few years. And one of the things we have to do is we have to increase the tax base. And we have to increase different ways of developing revenues. And one of them could be the community center convention letters.
I would recommend that council add that to a deliverable then in terms of reference for the next committee. If that's something that, is part of the deliverables, that next committee needs to actually work on that and include that.
It's not quite different than what had been proposed before. The conclusion was ultimately the bigger the better. That's the irony. Now the bigger the better is scary if you have to borrow to get to the bigger and better. But the assumption here is not to go into debt. So the risk we would actually take is more in the operational expense, and that you can actually address by having the building itself structured and designed in such a way that if one component does not work as anticipated and hoped for, you can change it. You could actually close it down without putting the whole at a risk. So as long as the municipality or the taxpayer does not get on the hook for major debt, the risk is actually getting less the bigger it gets. That's the irony. Provided, and that's new, we will avoid major debt.
And I don't disagree with you. What I want people to think about is that Ucluelet has a population, as I understand it, of about 1,800 people. We have double that here on the island most of the year, right? And we're suggesting building a building which is 2,000 square feet less than Ucluelet. The difference between Ucluelet and us is that their tourist industry is huge. And so we have to think about how do we increase our tourist industry so that we can use the building in all its various components. And that's all I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting that we stop. I'm suggesting that we plan it in such a way that everybody works together, that the community center people work with the economic development people, work with the municipality, work with possible philanthropic foundations to come up with an overall plan. And that it's nothing. I'm not trying not to be negative. I'm just trying to say we have to be realistic, and I'm going to be using that word a lot in the next 3 years. But realism is the hard feature on this island.
What I like here, we are not spending serious money until December. By December we know so much more, and we either get cold feet, we back off, or we share the excitement of the previous committee.
Mhm.
So until then, we are not really committing big bucks.
So, just hold on a second, Council Nash?
I really like having the community engagement over the summer, because there's been consultation with user groups, but there hasn't been any real community engagement about the facility and the plans and what it could be used for. So I'm happy to see the community engagements. I guess the second hunk of 240,000, some of these other monies are all going to get spent looking like October, November, December. And so that summer engagement process will give us some sense of the appetite for the community to go forward. And it really depends on, who you talk to as to whether there's appetite or not. The other is the business plan. When we met with the ministry staff at UBCM last year, one of the clear things they said to us is we're not interested in funding something where the doors can't be kept open. So I didn't bring my community center package with me today, and you do have sort of a, where's the operation, it's a list of revenues and a list of operating expenses, but you haven't sort of carried it out 5 years and shown how it would flow. Anything after 5 years, probably a little bit, who knows. But a little bit more of a business plan, and those funding people did say they're very keen to see the business plans because they don't want to fund something where the doors can't be kept open. So the comment about, okay, well, you close one part off and still operate the rest, that's not going to fly with funders. So, so a business plan, I think, needs to be worked on, and it's more than just and the other ancillary implications of having that on the other things in the community need to be factored into that.
Thank you. Darren?
Just further to the sort of comfort that this layout gives to the decision-making process. One thing that's not factored in here, and I'll go on the record again to say that I know we can cut that figure down for the concept planning and so on. So from that perspective, as we ease into this thing, we haven't considered what we can get from our own people.
No, we haven't at all.
I would just say that of course you're aware, there has been a business plan prepared based on the concept as it exists right now, but it's fully recognized that this is still early on, and the public consultation process is going to probably inform as to other changes, and we've talked about the possibility of library, whatever else. As those components are discussed and added in and so forth, the business plan is going to change and the numbers will change. And concurring with Councillor Duntz, building a building is actually going to be relatively simple. I mean, if you either have the money and you raise the money through donations and grants and so forth, and building it is relatively simple. Keeping it going, as the golf course found out, is another matter. And the business plan and basically those components that are, they're still to be developed, and to try and, at this point in time, and with this committee and the scope of the committee as where it started from 2.5 years ago to where it is right now, to extrapolate that into a 5-year plan and so forth would be smoking dope, because basically it's pie in the sky as we know it right now. All of this will, over the space of another 6 months, 8 months, will be solidified into something that is more recognizable as to an ongoing operation model. So I would propose, if we finish with the questions, I would propose that council endorse the work plan as outlined as option 2, and that council authorizes staff to spend up to $16,500 for phase 1 work of the Bowen Community Center project as outlined in the staff report dated April 18, 2012.
I'll move that.
Any further discussion?